We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
The Supreme Court rules on affirmative action and what's ahead in the Republican and Democratic primaries. That's what we'll be covering today on Liberty Nation Radio, right here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access breaking news, analysis, podcasts, all to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. LibertyNation.com, free speech and free thinking. In a stunning ruling from the Supreme Court, affirmative action, or more rightly, race-based admission to colleges, has been overturned. Now, what did the justices write, and how will this impact college admissions going forward? And we're very fortunate to be joined by Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, host of the excellent Uprising podcast, a constitutional attorney, and, in my opinion, scholar, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza. Thanks for coming in, Scott.
And most importantly, a man who has read the decision of the court. So,
well, you are the only person who has read it. Everybody else just gets their bits off Twitter or the New York Times, which we'll talk about later. Now, Scott, this has been a decision many years in the making. Could you give us a brief rundown of what the decision was and what it affects?
So the decision is that race-based affirmative action or racial preferences or racial sort of denigrating scores in college admissions is over. It violates the 14th Amendment's protection against equal protection of the laws based on race. And that's what the court held today by a majority opinion, 6-3. Justice Roberts writing the opinion of the court and Justice Sotomayor writing in dissent. And it changes everything now going forward for college admissions, Mark.
Let's just talk about the makeup of that. Obviously, it was the 6 more conservative justices against the 3 more liberal justices. They're
Yes.
called, and I think everybody kind of saw that part coming. But John Roberts to write the opinion on this, that will be a surprise. Chief Justice John Roberts, that will be a surprise to many, I think, won't it?
Well, most people with their racially conscious thinking would have thought perhaps that Clarence Thomas would write this decision. And certainly I was one of those people who
I was also one, but not because of my racially conscious thinking, but more because he's kind of had that bit between his teeth for at least 10 years.
Well, not only that, but Justice Thomas has spoken about his own experience with affirmative action, that his Yale law degree was worth nothing, essentially, for him, a black graduate of the institution rather than a white one, because the market had priced into it a massive discount because of the school's affirmative action policies. So it was good that the chief wrote the opinion, though. There's a certain gravitas that comes from an opinion by the chief, especially now we have a decision overturning at least one, if not several, landmark decisions in this key kind of area of contention for much of the country. So I think it's a good thing that the chief wrote the 6-3 decision. He seems to have, sort of put forth what the new law is going to be in this country regarding it. And it is one where they can't judge people based on their race alone, and they cannot use it as a negative. And the opinion of the court rejected the notion that they weren't doing those exact things. They were punishing Asians and whites and rewarding blacks, all on the basis of the colors of their skin.
Yeah, I obviously I haven't read the entire opinion because I wouldn't understand it if I did, to be completely honest. But one part that struck out at me was a table that was included that highlighted the likelihood of an admission, all other things being equal, based solely on race. And if I just read this to you, it says, for example, an Asian American in the 4th lowest decile has virtually no chance of being admitted to Harvard, at 0.9% chance. But an African American in that decile has a higher chance of admission, 12.8%, than an Asian American in the top decile, 12.7%. Now, without being too culturally insensitive, are there a lot of tiger moms quite happy today?
Yeah, right. I forgot about that term. Absolutely. Asian Americans will benefit the most by having their punishing
by not having their race used against them as a detrimental factor.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you could say that blacks will suffer the most by not having the benefit of being positively discriminated in favor of. But of course, those of us who oppose affirmative action for the benefit of blacks think that they are actually a victim of affirmative action because notably the school's acceptance rates of stellar candidates, the curriculum matches with the abilities of most of the student body. And so what happens is that people who aren't well qualified to attend these schools because they haven't done the right undergraduate preparation, for instance, they can't keep up with the other people in their class. And because they were elevated not because of the work they've done or their intellect, but because of their race, they fall by the wayside and oftentimes suffer dramatically increased dropout rates, for instance. So it actually will hopefully benefit all Americans to have this, cast aside, Mark.
So what does Harvard have to do based on this being their present practice being ruled unconstitutional and against the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause? What does Harvard have to now do? And when does that start? Does that start today for the next incoming cohort?
Oh, it starts right this second. The opinion is in, and the law is now the king is dead, long live the king, right? So the previous ruling on whether affirmative action violated the Constitution, that it did not generally, is now over, and now it does. And not only does it violate the Constitution, but it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment for race-based discrimination, which is not an area where you want to go ahead and violate the law if you want to, keep your bank account balance where it was before, because those cases are, lawyers will readily take those cases.
They're big punitive damage winners, those kind of cases.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And so they will act presently, Mark, to change their ways. They basically consider race all up and down the line. The very first cut you get at the Harvard admission roundtable is you get a plus factor, if you have the right race, and then you get another later on. And then they look at the percentage of what they're going to admit for the current year and look at past years and make sure that there's no drop off on the basis of race. And so then they will rejigger the numbers. In other words, they're racially balancing the whole way. The idea that there's some academic standard or other standard by which they're choosing from, and race is one of many of those factors, is part of the lie that Justice Roberts discusses in the court's opinion. And he says that it's the most important thing that you could be in a Harvard class is be a black person, for instance. And being Asian is one of the worst things that you can be.
Yeah, the New York Times, as soon as the opinion dropped, they wrote, the major ruling curtails race-conscious college admissions in the U.S., all but ensuring that elite institutions become whiter and more Asian and less black and Latino. Now, to me, that's a shocking thing for the paper of record to be saying, isn't it?
Well, as the color palettes go, that may strictly speaking be true. That's the lead for the New York Times in every story, right? Is such and such is the lead, and then the subheading is poor blacks, most affected by this news is sort of the stereotype, and there's no surprise that they would say that here. And again, from the sort of small-minded view, if you will, that if you stop giving unarmed favors to one group, that they will, it'll be to their detriment to stop getting those favors. That's one way to view it. I certainly don't. I think it's to their benefit that they will be able to compete with every other American without scrutiny on the basis of their race, and that when they go to apply for a job or advanced education, the people who look at their transcripts will know that they weren't elevated on the basis of their race, which is a real,
Yeah, the new job market economy is, did you go to Harvard before 2023?
Yeah.
Now, we'll be back with Scott Diekesender discussing the implications for future students and indeed across America right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.